Sometimes when we love someone, we can see dangers they're blind to. Sometimes our warnings fall on deaf ears until it's too late. This is the story of Emily Martinez, a woman whose worst fears came true when the man she loved ignored her desperate pleas to be careful. What started as professional concern from a caring girlfriend became a nightmare that would leave her boyfriend unable to use his right arm for 6 months, and Emily fighting not just to help him heal, but to forgive herself for not being more insistent when it mattered most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emily Martinez had always been the cautious one in her relationship with Marcus Chen. At 26, she worked as a physical therapist at Phoenix Rehabilitation Center, where she spent her days helping patients recover from workplace injuries, sports accidents, and surgical procedures. Her job had given her an intimate understanding of how quickly life could change, how a single moment of poor judgment or bad luck could leave someone fighting for months to regain basic functions that most people took for granted. Marcus, her boyfriend of 3 years, was everything Emily admired and worried about in equal measure. At 28, he worked as a warehouse supervisor at a large distribution center, and his job required the kind of physical strength and leadership that had first attracted Emily to him. Marcus was the guy everyone looked up to, the one who could lift the heaviest boxes when everyone else struggled, the supervisor who led by example rather than just giving orders. But Emily also saw the dangerous side of his personality, the stubborn pride that made him refuse help, the need to prove himself as the strongest person in the room, and the tendency to dismiss safety concerns as weakness. Emily's work at the rehabilitation center had taught her to recognize the warning signs of workplace accidents waiting to happen. She had treated dozens of warehouse workers, construction employees, and manual laborers who all shared similar stories. They had pushed beyond their limits, ignored safety protocols, or tried to handle tasks that were meant for teams or specialized equipment. The injuries were often severe: torn rotator cuffs, herniated discs, nerve damage, and the recovery process was always longer and more difficult than patients expected. The trouble began on a Monday morning in late September. Marcus came home from work exhausted and complaining about his sore back and shoulders. Emily immediately noticed the way he was moving, favoring his right side and wincing when he reached for things. As a physical therapist, she could read the signs of overexertion and muscle strain that might not be obvious to someone without her training. "What happened at work today?" Emily asked, her professional instincts kicking in as she watched Marcus struggle to take off his jacket. Marcus described the delivery they had received: massive steel components for manufacturing machinery, each piece weighing between 150 and 300 pounds. The warehouse was understaffed due to flu outbreaks, and Marcus had decided that he and his remaining team could handle the job without waiting for additional personnel or proper lifting equipment. Emily felt a chill of recognition. She had seen this exact scenario play out in her clinic more times than she could count. "Marcus, you need to be more careful," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Those weights you're describing, that's exactly how people end up with serious injuries. I see patients every day who thought they could handle more than their bodies were designed for." Marcus brushed off her concern with the same casual confidence that usually charmed her, but now made her stomach twist with anxiety. "Come on, Em. I've been doing this job for 5 years. I know my limits." "But do you really?" Emily pressed, her professional knowledge warring with her desire not to seem like she was nagging. "Because what you're describing sounds like you're pushing way past any reasonable limit. Promise me you'll use proper equipment tomorrow, or at least get more people to help." Emily could see the irritation flash across Marcus's face. She knew he hated when she brought her work expertise into their personal life, especially when it seemed to question his competence or masculinity. "I don't need you to tell me how to do my job," he said, his tone sharper than usual. "I'm not some broken patient at your clinic. I'm a grown man who can take care of himself." The word stung, but Emily tried once more, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm not questioning your strength or your abilities, Marcus. I'm just asking you to be smart about this. You've got nothing to prove to anyone." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Marcus replied, already turning away from the conversation. "I'm just doing my job." But Emily could see it in his posture, hear it in his voice, the defensive pride that she had learned to recognize in so many of her patients' stories, the need to be seen as capable, strong, indispensable. She had heard variations of this conversation from countless injured workers who had pushed themselves beyond safe limits because they felt they had to prove something to their coworkers, their supervisors, or themselves. That night, Emily lay awake listening to Marcus sleep, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. In her work, she had learned that the most dangerous workplace accidents often happened to experienced workers who had become overconfident in their abilities. She had treated forklift operators who had been driving for 20 years before the accident that changed their lives, construction workers who had been building houses since they were teenagers before the fall that left them permanently disabled. Emily knew that Marcus was walking into exactly the kind of situation that led to the injuries she treated every day. She could picture him tomorrow, faced with another delivery of heavy equipment, understaffed and under pressure, making the same dangerous choices that had already left him sore and strained. She could see him lifting something too heavy, moving too fast, prioritizing speed over safety because he felt responsible for his team's productivity. But she also knew Marcus well enough to understand that pushing harder would only make him more resistant to her warnings. His pride was one of the things she loved about him and one of the things that terrified her. She had seen that same pride in so many of her patients, the determination that had served them well in many areas of life, but had ultimately led to devastating injuries when applied without wisdom or restraint. As Emily finally drifted off to sleep, she whispered a quiet prayer that Marcus would be careful, that his experience and common sense would override his need to prove himself. She had no way of knowing that within 12 hours, her worst fears would become reality, and that her warnings, dismissed as overprotective worry, would prove to be tragically prophetic.
The next morning, Emily woke with a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. Marcus had already left for work, and she found herself checking her phone repeatedly throughout her morning routine, half expecting a call that she desperately hoped would never come. At the rehabilitation center, Emily threw herself into her work with her usual patients, but her mind kept drifting to Marcus and the heavy equipment he would be dealing with at the warehouse. Between sessions, she found herself researching workplace injury statistics, as if gathering more data could somehow retroactively make Marcus more cautious. "You seem distracted today," observed Dr. Patricia Kim, the clinic's director, as Emily prepared for her 11 a.m. appointment. "Everything okay?" Emily hesitated, then decided to voice her concerns. "My boyfriend is dealing with some dangerous lifting situations at work. I warned him about it last night, but..." She trailed off, not wanting to sound like she was gossiping about her personal life. Dr. Kim, who had been treating workplace injuries for over 15 years, understood immediately. "The ones who think they know better are always the hardest to help," she said gently. "All we can do is speak up when we see potential problems. After that, it's out of our hands." Emily nodded, but the reassurance did little to ease her anxiety. She had spoken up, but Marcus's dismissive response kept replaying in her mind. Should she have been more insistent? Should she have found a different way to express her concerns? At exactly 12:47 p.m., Emily's worst nightmare began with the ring of her cell phone. The caller ID showed Marcus's workplace number, but when she answered, it wasn't Marcus on the line. "Is this Emily Martinez?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Yes, this is Emily." "Who is this?" "This is Jerry Williams from Phoenix Distribution. I work with Marcus. There's been an accident, and Marcus asked me to call you." Emily's hand tightened on the phone as the blood drained from her face. "What kind of accident? Is he okay?" "He's conscious and talking, but he's hurt pretty bad. They're taking him to Phoenix General Hospital right now. His right arm... Something happened to his shoulder when he was moving a steel beam." Emily's professional training kicked in even as her personal world tilted. "Can he move his arm? Is there any numbness or tingling in his fingers?" "He can't lift it at all, and he said his hand feels weird, like it's asleep," replied Jerry. "The paramedics said they need to do x-rays and stuff to see how bad it is." Emily was already grabbing her keys and purse. "I'm on my way to the hospital. Thank you for calling me, Jerry." The drive to Phoenix General Hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of Emily's life. Every medical scenario she had studied, every workplace injury she had treated, ran through her mind in vivid detail. Shoulder injuries involving heavy lifting could range from minor strains to complete rotator cuff tears, nerve damage, or complex fractures. The fact that Marcus couldn't lift his arm and was experiencing numbness suggested something serious. Emily arrived at the emergency department just as the ambulance was pulling up. She watched through the glass doors as paramedics wheeled Marcus inside on a stretcher, his right arm secured against his body in a complex immobilization device. Even from a distance, she could see the pain and confusion in his face. "I'm Emily Martinez," she told the registration clerk. "My boyfriend Marcus Chen was just brought in by ambulance." Within a few minutes, Emily was allowed to see Marcus in the emergency bay. He looked pale and shaken, his usual confident demeanor replaced with vulnerability that broke her heart. "Em," he said when he saw her, his voice tight with pain and something that might have been embarrassment. "I'm sorry. You were right." Emily took his left hand in both of hers, fighting back tears. "Don't apologize. Just tell me what happened." Marcus's story confirmed her worst fears. The warehouse had received another delivery of heavy steel components, even larger than the previous day's shipment. Understaffed and under pressure from an impatient delivery driver, Marcus had made the choice he'd made the day before to handle the heaviest pieces himself rather than slow down the process or call for additional help. "There was the steel beam," Marcus explained, wincing as the movement of talking sent pain through his shoulder. "The manifest said 280 pounds. I knew it was at the edge of what I could handle, but everyone was tired and the driver was getting impatient." Emily closed her eyes, seeing the scene play out exactly as she had feared. "What happened when you tried to lift it?" "It was heavier than I expected and awkward to grip. I had it positioned on the dolly, but when I tried to maneuver it, it shifted in my hands. All that weight just twisted my shoulder in a way it wasn't meant to go." The emergency room physician, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, confirmed what Emily had suspected from Marcus's description of symptoms. The preliminary x-rays showed a severe shoulder injury that would require immediate MRI imaging to determine the full extent of the damage. "Based on what I'm seeing and the mechanism of injury you've described, Mr. Chen likely has a significant rotator cuff tear, possibly involving multiple tendons," Dr. Walsh explained to both of them. "The numbness and weakness in his arm suggests there may also be nerve involvement." As they waited for the MRI results, Emily sat beside Marcus's hospital bed, holding his uninjured hand and fighting back a complex mix of emotions. Relief that he was conscious and stable, anger at the warehouse management for creating dangerous working conditions, guilt for not being more insistent with her warnings, and underneath it all, the professional knowledge that made her understand exactly how serious this injury could be. I should have listened to you," Marcus said quietly. "Last night when you warned me about the lifting, you knew this could happen, didn't you?" Emily squeezed his hand. "I was scared this could happen," she said honestly. "I see these injuries all the time at work, but Marcus, I never wanted to be right about this." When the MRI results came back, they confirmed the severity of the situation. Marcus had suffered a complete tear of his rotator cuff, damage to his shoulder labrum, and compression of the brachial plexus, the network of nerves that controlled movement and sensation in his arm. The injury would require complex surgery and extensive rehabilitation. "I'm going to be straight with both of you," Dr. Walsh said as she reviewed the imaging results. "This is a very serious injury. Mr. Chen will need surgery within the next few days, followed by at least 6 months of recovery time. Even with the best possible outcome, there may be permanent limitations in strength and range of motion." Emily felt her professional composure finally crack as the full implications sank in. 6 months of recovery, possible permanent disability, and all of it preventable if Marcus had just listened to her warning, if the warehouse had proper safety protocols, if she had found a way to make him understand the real risks he was taking.
As the reality of Marcus's situation settled in, Emily found herself shifting between two distinct roles: the loving, supportive girlfriend and the experienced physical therapist who understood exactly what lay ahead. The duality was emotionally exhausting, but it also gave her a unique perspective on both the personal and medical aspects of Marcus's injury.
Dr. Walsh explained that the surgery would be performed by Dr. Robert Kim, a specialist in complex shoulder reconstructions. The procedure would involve repairing the torn rotator cuff tendons, addressing the labral damage, and decompressing the affected nerves. It was delicate work that would require Marcus to be completely immobilized for the first 4 to 6 weeks of recovery. The surgery itself will take approximately 3 to 4 hours, Dr. Welsh told them. Afterward, Mr. Chen will be in a shoulder immobilizer that prevents any movement of the right arm. This is critical for proper healing. Any movement during those first weeks could compromise the surgical repair. Emily listened to the medical explanation with professional understanding, while watching Marcus process the information with growing despair. She could see him calculating the implications: 6 months away from work, extensive medical bills, the loss of independence that came with having only one functional arm. "What about work?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the sole supervisor on my shift. My team depends on me." Dr. Walsh and Emily exchanged a look. "Mr. Chen, I'm afraid work is going to be the last thing on your mind for quite some time. This type of injury requires complete rest and gradual rehabilitation. Any attempt to return to physical work prematurely could result in permanent disability." That evening, as Marcus was admitted to the hospital for pre-surgical observation, Emily called her supervisor at the rehabilitation center to explain the situation and arrange for time off to care for Marcus during his initial recovery. "Take all the time you need," Dr. Kim told her. "And Emily, remember that you can't blame yourself for this. You warned him about the risks. That's all anyone can do." But Emily did blame herself, at least partially. As she sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Marcus's bed, she replayed their conversation from the night before over and over. Should she have been more forceful in her warning? Should she have found a way to make him understand the severity of the risks he was taking? "I keep thinking about what you said last night, about seeing patients who thought they could handle more than their bodies were designed for. I was so dismissive of your concerns." Emily looked up from her phone, where she had been researching post-surgical shoulder rehabilitation protocols. "Marcus, I don't want this to be about who was right and who was wrong. I want to focus on getting you better." "But you were right," Marcus insisted. "You saw exactly what was going to happen, and I brushed you off like you didn't know what you were talking about. The irony is that you probably know more about these kinds of injuries than anyone." It was true. Emily had treated dozens of patients with similar injuries, and she understood the long road ahead better than Marcus could possibly imagine. She knew about the initial period of complete immobilization, the slow and sometimes frustrating process of regaining range of motion, the strength training that would come months later, and the psychological challenges that accompanied such a dramatic loss of function. "What I know is going to help us get through this," Emily said. "I understand what the recovery process looks like, what kind of progress to expect, and how to avoid complications. That's going to be valuable." The night before surgery was difficult for both of them. Marcus was anxious about the procedure and the uncertainty of his recovery, while Emily was grappling with the knowledge of just how challenging the next 6 months would be. She had seen patients struggle with depression, relationship stress, and identity crises as they adjusted to temporary or permanent disabilities. What if I'm never the same?" Marcus asked as they tried to settle in for the night. "What if I can't go back to my old job? What if my arm is never strong enough for the kind of work I do?" Emily had been thinking about this since the injury occurred. She knew the type of physical strength required for his job, but she also knew that he had skills that weren't dependent on physical power. "Marcus, there's a possibility that you may not be able to return to the same type of physical work," she said honestly. "But that doesn't mean your career is over. It just means we might need to think about different options." "Like what?" "I've been doing warehouse work since I was 22. It's all I know." You have 5 years of supervisory experience, knowledge of logistics and inventory systems, and leadership skills that aren't dependent on physical strength. There are a lot of directions you could go that would use your experience and expertise. You mean desk jobs. I mean jobs that use your brain instead of just your muscles. Marcus, you're intelligent and experienced. This injury might force you to discover capabilities you never knew you had. It was a perspective that would become central to Marcus's recovery, though neither of them could see it clearly in that moment of crisis and uncertainty. The surgery took place the following morning, lasting nearly 4 hours due to the complexity of the repairs needed. Emily spent the time in the surgical waiting room fielding calls from Marcus's family and coworkers while researching everything she could about post-surgical shoulder rehabilitation for complex shoulder injuries. When Dr. Kim finally emerged from surgery, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "The surgery went as we could have hoped," he told Emily. "We were able to repair the rotator cuff tears and address the nerve compression. The labral damage was more extensive than anticipated, which is why the surgery took longer, but we were able to clean that up as well." "What's his prognosis?" Emily asked. "It's still going to be a long recovery. The nerve involvement means he may experience weakness and numbness for several months, but if he's compliant with the rehabilitation process and doesn't rush back to activity too quickly, there's a good chance of returning to near normal function." When Marcus woke up from surgery, his entire right side was heavily bandaged and immobilized in a complex sling system that looked more like medical equipment than a simple arm support. Emily could see the confusion and disorientation in his eyes as he tried to process his new reality. "How do you feel?" Emily asked, taking his left hand. "Connected," Marcus said groggily. "Like my arm isn't part of my body anymore." It was exactly what Emily had expected him to say. She had heard similar descriptions from countless patients as they awakened from shoulder surgery. The combination of anesthesia, pain medication, and nerve disruption often left patients feeling like their injured limb was foreign or absent. "That's normal," Emily assured him. "As the nerves heal and the swelling goes down, that sensation should improve." But even as she offered reassurance, Emily knew that the hardest part of Marcus's journey was just beginning. The next 6 months would test not just his physical resilience, but his mental and emotional strength as well. And through it all, Emily would carry the weight of knowing that she had seen this coming and had been unable to prevent it.
Emily's life changed as dramatically as Marcus's the moment his injury occurred. While he dealt with the physical pain and limitations, she found herself thrust into the dual role of caregiver and breadwinner, all while carrying the emotional weight of having predicted exactly what happened. The first week after Marcus's surgery was a crash course in patience and adaptation. Emily had taken 2 weeks off from the rehabilitation center to care for Marcus during his initial recovery, but she quickly realized that helping someone she loved was entirely different than treating patients professionally. With her patients, she could maintain clinical objectivity and emotional distance. With Marcus, every wince of pain, every moment of frustration cut through her like a knife. "I can't even cut my own food," Marcus said one evening, staring at his dinner plate with a mixture of anger and despair. His right arm was completely immobilized, secured against his body in a complex sling system that prevented any movement whatsoever. Emily watched him struggle with the simple task of eating and felt her heart break a little more. She had seen this exact scenario play out hundreds of times with her patients, but witnessing Marcus's loss of independence was infinitely more painful than she had anticipated. "It's temporary," she said gently, reaching over to help cut his chicken. "In 6 months, this will all be behind you." 6 months. Marcus repeated with bitter resignation. 6 months because I was too stupid and stubborn to listen to you. This was the conversation Emily had been dreading, but knew was inevitable. The guilt and self-recrimination she saw in Marcus's face mirrored her own internal struggle. She had warned him, but had she done enough? Could she have found a way to make him listen?
Marcus, I'm not here to say I told you so, Emily said carefully. I'm here because I love you and want to help you get through this. But you did tell me so, Marcus replied, his voice heavy with regret. You warned me exactly about this. You asked me to be careful, to use proper equipment, to get help. And I brushed you off like you didn't know what you were talking about. Emily set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. I warned you because I was scared this would happen. I see these injuries every day at work, and I know how devastating they can be. But Marcus, I never wanted to be right about this. The financial stress of the situation became apparent within the first week. Workers' compensation would cover Marcus's medical expenses and provide partial income replacement, but it was only about 60% of his regular salary. Meanwhile, Emily's time off work to care for him meant they were operating on even less income during their highest expense period. The rent is due next week, Emily mentioned one evening as she reviewed their finances. She had spread bills, bank statements, and insurance paperwork across their kitchen table, trying to figure out how to make their reduced income cover their expenses. Marcus stared at the papers with growing anxiety. How short are we? About $400 this month, not counting the prescription costs and therapy copays that start soon, Emily replied. She had been researching their options, looking into payment plans for medical bills, and considering whether she could take on additional patients through freelance work. Maybe I could do some consulting work from home, Marcus suggested. There might be warehouses that need help with inventory systems, and I could do that with one arm. Emily recognized the tone, the same stubborn determination that had gotten Marcus into this situation in the first place. Marcus, you're supposed to be focusing on healing. Dr. Kim was very clear about avoiding stress and getting adequate rest. But we can't just ignore our bills, Marcus replied, his voice rising slightly. I did this to us, and now I need to figure out how to fix it. Emily saw the dangerous pattern emerging. Marcus trying to solve everything through sheer force of will, the same mentality that had led to his injury. We'll figure it out together, she said firmly, but not by you pushing yourself before you're ready. The emotional toll of being both caregiver and sole provider began to wear on Emily in ways she hadn't expected. At work, she was the competent professional who helped other people recover from injuries. At home, she was the exhausted girlfriend trying to keep her relationship and finances afloat while watching the man she loved struggle with depression and helplessness. I don't know who I am if I'm not the strong one, Marcus admitted to Emily one evening after a particularly difficult day. My whole life, I've been the guy who could handle anything, who could fix problems, who could take care of you. Now I can't even take care of myself. Emily had been waiting for this conversation, knowing it would come eventually. In her professional work, she had seen many patients struggle with the identity crisis that often accompanied serious injuries. But helping Marcus through this crisis was far more complex than anything she had dealt with in her clinical practice. You're still the same person, she said gently. You're still intelligent, caring, determined, and resourceful. Those qualities don't come from your physical strength. But my job, my career, everything I've worked for, it's all based on being physically capable. What if I can't go back to warehouse work? What if my arm is never the same? These were valid concerns, and Emily's medical knowledge made her acutely aware that Marcus might never regain his full strength or range of motion. Rather than offering false hope, she tried to help him see alternative possibilities. Then we'll figure out what comes next, she said. Marcus, maybe this is an opportunity to think about what else you might want to do with your career. You have experience in logistics, management, problem solving. Those skills don't require you to lift heavy objects. With one arm? Marcus asked bitterly. With your mind, Emily corrected. Your knowledge and experience don't require physical strength. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Emily's perspective on the situation was complicated by her professional knowledge. She understood the recovery timeline better than Marcus did, which meant that she could see progress that he couldn't recognize and anticipate challenges that he wasn't prepared for. But this knowledge was both a blessing and a burden. During Marcus's 4th week of recovery, Emily received a call that tested her resolve and her relationship with Marcus in unexpected ways. Jerry, Marcus's former colleague, called to inform them about another accident at the warehouse, another worker injured while trying to move heavy equipment without proper support. "Jerry, I thought Marcus should know. Tom tried to handle one of those steel beams by himself, just like what happened to Marcus. He didn't get hurt as bad, but he's out with a back injury." Emily felt a familiar surge of anger and frustration. The same dangerous conditions that had injured Marcus were still present, still putting other workers at risk. Is Tom going to be okay? He should be fine, but he's looking at a few weeks of recovery. The thing is, Emily, we keep telling management we need better equipment and procedures, but they say the budget doesn't allow for it. After the call, Emily found herself in the unusual position of being more outraged about the workplace safety issues than Marcus was. Her professional expertise and her personal experience with the consequences of these injuries gave her a unique perspective on just how preventable Tom's accident had been. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Emily told Marcus after sharing the news about Tom. "These injuries weren't a freak accident. It was the result of systematic safety problems that are still putting people at risk." Marcus looked troubled but resigned. "There's not much I can do about it from here." "But there might be something we could do about it when you're recovered," Emily said, an idea beginning to form in her mind as Marcus's recovery progressed. But for now, Emily was focused on managing the daily challenges of his rehabilitation and their financial situation. "I've been thinking about taking on some additional freelance therapy work," Emily told Marcus. "There's a home health agency that needs physical therapists for evening and weekend visits. Em, you're already exhausted from taking care of me and working full-time. I don't want you to burn yourself out because of my mistake." Emily looked at him seriously. "Marcus, we're in this together. Your injury affects both of us, and we both need to contribute to getting through this. Right now, that means I take on more work while you focus on healing." It was a conversation that marked a turning point in their relationship dynamic. Instead of Marcus being the provider and protector, they were learning to function as true partners, sharing both burdens and decisions. By Marcus's 6th week of recovery, Emily had developed a routine that balanced his care needs with her own work responsibilities and their financial pressures. She worked full-time at the Rehabilitation Center during the day, spent evenings helping Marcus with exercises and daily tasks, and took on freelance home health visits on weekends to supplement their income. The physical demands of this schedule were manageable for Emily, who had always been energetic and organized. The emotional demands were more challenging. Watching Marcus struggle with depression and helplessness was harder than any clinical case she had handled because she couldn't maintain professional detachment when the patient was the person she loved most. "I feel like I'm failing you," Marcus said one evening as Emily helped him through the range of motion exercises prescribed by his physical therapist. "You're working yourself to death while I sit here doing nothing." Emily paused in the middle of gently moving his shoulder through its limited range of motion. "You're not doing nothing, Marcus. You're healing. That's your job right now." "But it doesn't feel like enough," Marcus replied. "You warned me this would happen. You've rearranged your entire life to take care of me, and now you're working extra hours to pay for my mistake." Emily had been thinking about this dynamic a lot over the past few weeks. In some ways, Marcus's injury had confirmed her fears about his tendency to take unnecessary risks, but it had also revealed strengths in their relationship that she hadn't fully appreciated before. "Marcus, do you remember what you said to me the night before your injury? About not needing me to tell you how to do your job?" Marcus winced, though whether from physical pain or embarrassment wasn't clear. "I was dismissive and arrogant. I'm sorry." "What I realized after your injury is that I wasn't trying to control you or question your competence. I was trying to protect something I valued. You, us, our future together. And now that you're injured,
protecting those same things means helping you recover and adapt. The conversation reflected a shift in Emily's understanding of her role in their relationship. Before the injury, she had sometimes felt like Marcus saw her professional concerns as interference. Now, her expertise was one of their most valuable resources for navigating his recovery. Emily's background in physical therapy gave her insights into Marcus's progress that might not be apparent in clinical assessments. She could see small improvements in his movement patterns that might not be apparent in clinical assessments. She also understood the psychological aspects of recovery in ways that helped her support Marcus through his darkest moments. "You know what I think helped me get through the worst of this?" Marcus told Emily during his 8th week. "Having someone who understood what was happening to my body and could explain it to me. When you told me that the numbness in my fingers was normal or that the stiffness would improve gradually, I believed you because I know you've seen this before." Emily smiled. "That's the first time you've appreciated my professional expertise interfering in your personal life. It's not interfering when it's helping. I think I was so focused on proving I didn't need help that I couldn't see when someone was offering exactly the kind of help I actually needed." The turning point in Marcus's recovery came during his 10th week, when Emily accompanied him to a physical therapy appointment and witnessed a conversation that would change both of their perspectives on his injury and their future. Marcus was working with David Chen, a physical therapist at Emily's clinic who specialized in post-surgical shoulder rehabilitation. During a break between exercises, another patient struck up a conversation with Marcus about his recovery experience. "How long have you been coming here?" Marcus asked the man who introduced himself as Robert. "About 4 months now. I had rotator cuff surgery back in January." Emily watched the conversation with professional interest. Robert appeared to have good use of his arm and was doing exercises that Marcus couldn't yet attempt. "Were you able to go back to your old job?" Marcus asked. Robert shook his head. "I was a roofer before the injury, fell off a ladder trying to rush a job. My wife had been telling me for months to be more careful, that I was taking too many risks. She was right, but I didn't want to admit it." Emily felt Marcus glance at her, and she saw recognition in his expression. "Anyway," Robert continued, "I couldn't go back to roofing, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I started a business doing home inspections, uses all my construction knowledge, but doesn't require the physical demands. I'm actually making more money now." "Do you miss it, the physical work?" Marcus asked. "Sometimes," Robert admitted, "but I don't miss the constant worry about getting hurt or the stress on my family every time I took a dangerous job. And I definitely don't miss feeling like I had to prove how tough I was all the time." Emily watched Marcus absorb this information, and she could see something shifting in his perspective. For weeks, he had been mourning the loss of his old identity as the strong, capable warehouse supervisor. But Robert was showing him that there could be life, even better life, beyond that identity. That evening, Marcus shared Robert's story with Emily, and for the first time since his injury, she heard genuine optimism in his voice. "Maybe you were right about this being an opportunity instead of just a disaster," Marcus said quietly. "I've been so focused on what I lost that I haven't been thinking about what I might gain." Emily felt a surge of hope. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about what you said about using my brain instead of just my muscles, and talking to Robert today made me realize that maybe I've been defining myself too narrowly." Emily had been waiting for this moment, when Marcus would stop seeing his injury as purely a loss and start considering the possibilities it might open up. Her professional experience had taught her that this psychological shift was often more important than the physical healing in determining long-term outcomes. "What kind of possibilities are you thinking about?" she asked. Marcus had been researching career alternatives during his recovery time, awkwardly typing with his left hand while Emily was at work. "I've been looking into getting certified in logistics software," he explained. "There are companies that help warehouses optimize their operations, and they need consultants who understand the work from the inside." Emily felt a thrill of excitement. This was exactly the kind of forward-thinking adaptation that she had hoped Marcus would eventually embrace. You have all the hands-on knowledge, but you'd be applying it in a way that doesn't depend on physical strength. The best part is that I could work on it during my recovery. The certification program is entirely online, so I can make progress while I'm still healing. For Emily, this conversation represented a turning point not just in Marcus's recovery, but in her understanding of her own role in their relationship. She had always been the one who worried about safety and long-term consequences, while Marcus focused on immediate challenges and physical solutions. His injury had forced both of them to appreciate the value of her perspective in ways that might not have happened otherwise. "I'm proud of how you're handling this," Emily told him. 3 months ago, you would have been fighting against the limitations, trying to force your way back to exactly where you were before. Now you're adapting and finding new ways to use your strength. "I learned that from you," Marcus said. "You've been showing me since the beginning that strength isn't about how much you can lift or how many risks you're willing to take. It's about making smart decisions and having the courage to change when change is necessary."
Emily's role as Marcus's primary support system during his recovery had taught her things about herself that she never could have discovered in her professional work alone. She had always been competent and caring in her job, but caring for someone she loved had revealed reserves of patience, creativity, and determination that surprised even her. By Marcus's 12th week of recovery, their relationship had evolved into something stronger and more balanced than it had been before his injury. The experience had forced them to communicate more openly about fears, limitations, and future goals than they ever had when everything in their lives was going smoothly. "I've been thinking about something," Emily said one evening as they worked through Marcus's exercises together. His range of motion had improved dramatically, and he could now lift his arm nearly to shoulder height without assistance. "What's that?" Marcus asked, concentrating on the resistance band exercises that were rebuilding his shoulder strength. "Your injury has given me a different perspective on my own work," Emily said. "Before this happened, I treated workplace injuries as individual medical problems. Now I understand how these injuries affect entire families, relationships, finances, everything." Marcus paused in his exercise. "How so?" "Well, when you got hurt, it wasn't just your problem to solve. It became our problem, our financial stress, our relationship challenge. I had to take on extra work, rearrange my schedule, learn to be a caregiver instead of just a therapist. None of that shows up in medical records, but it's a huge part of what workplace injuries actually cost." Emily had been thinking about this broader impact as she watched Marcus navigate his recovery and their relationship adapt to his temporary disability. Her professional training had focused on the medical aspects of injuries, but living through one had shown her the ripple effects that extended far beyond the injured person. "I think that's why your idea about workplace safety consulting could be so valuable," Emily continued. "You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them." Marcus had been making progress on his logistics software certification, but Emily's observations sparked a different idea. "What if I focused on safety consulting instead of just operational efficiency?" he said. "I could help companies understand the true cost of workplace injuries and develop systems to prevent them." Emily felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work that could give Marcus's experience meaning and purpose. "That's brilliant! You'd be uniquely qualified. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them." Marcus had been making progress on his logistics software certification, but Emily's observations sparked a different idea. "What if I focused on safety consulting instead of just operational efficiency?" he said. "I could help companies understand the true cost of workplace injuries and develop systems to prevent them." Emily felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work that could give Marcus's experience meaning and purpose. "That's
brilliant! You'd be uniquely qualified. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. Marcus had been making progress on his logistics software certification, but Emily's observations sparked a different idea. What if I focused on safety consulting instead of just operational efficiency? He said. I could help companies understand the true cost of workplace injuries and develop systems to prevent them. Emily felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work that could give Marcus's experience meaning and purpose. That's brilliant. You'd be uniquely qualified. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. I've been thinking about something, Emily said one evening as they worked through Marcus's exercises together. His range of motion had improved dramatically, and he could now lift his arm nearly to shoulder height without assistance. What's that? Marcus asked, concentrating on the resistance band exercises that were rebuilding his shoulder strength. Your injury has given me a different perspective on my own work, Emily said. Before this happened, I treated workplace injuries as individual medical problems. Now I understand how these injuries affect entire families, relationships, finances, everything. Marcus paused in his exercise. How so? Well, when you got hurt, it wasn't just your problem to solve. It became our problem, our financial stress, our relationship challenge. I had to take on extra work, rearrange my schedule, learn to be a caregiver instead of just a therapist. None of that shows up in medical records, but it's a huge part of what workplace injuries actually cost. Emily had been thinking about this broader impact as she watched Marcus navigate his recovery and their relationship adapt to his temporary disability. Her professional training had focused on the medical aspects of injuries, but living through one had shown her the ripple effects that extended far beyond the injured person. I think that's why your idea about workplace safety consulting could be so valuable, Emily continued. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. Marcus had been making progress on his logistics software certification, but Emily's observations sparked a different idea. What if I focused on safety consulting instead of just operational efficiency? He said, I could help companies understand the true cost of workplace injuries and develop systems to prevent them. Emily felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work that could give Marcus's experience meaning and purpose. That's brilliant! You'd be uniquely qualified. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. Marcus had been making progress on his logistics software certification, but Emily's observation sparked a different idea. What if I focused on safety consulting instead of just operational efficiency? He said, I could help companies understand the true cost of workplace injuries and develop systems to prevent them. Emily felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of work that could give Marcus's experience meaning and purpose. That's brilliant! You'd be uniquely qualified. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. Emily had been thinking about this broader impact as she watched Marcus navigate his recovery and their relationship adapt to his temporary disability. Her professional training had focused on the medical aspects of injuries, but living through one had shown her the ripple effects that extended far beyond the injured person. I think that's why your idea about workplace safety consulting could be so valuable, Emily continued. You understand both the operational side of how these injuries happen, and now you understand the real cost, not just to the injured person, but to everyone around them. Marcus had been thinking about the same thing. Their combined expertise could be valuable not just for Marcus's new career direction, but for their ongoing relationship as well. They had learned to leverage their different strengths and perspectives instead of seeing them as sources of conflict. As Marcus entered his 4th month of recovery, Emily began to see the light at the end of the tunnel, not just for his physical healing, but for the complete transformation of their relationship and their future plans. The injury that initially seemed like a catastrophe was revealing itself to be a catalyst for positive changes that might never have happened otherwise. "I have a confession," Emily told Marcus one evening as they planned his transition back to work. "I'm actually grateful for how things turned out." Marcus looked surprised. "Grateful that I got injured? Grateful that we learned to work through a major crisis together. Grateful that you learned to value my perspective. Grateful that we discovered strengths in our relationship that we didn't know we had. And grateful that your experience might help other people avoid going through what we went through." Marcus took her hand with his left hand. His right arm was still not strong enough for many activities, but it was functional enough for gentle movements. "I'm grateful too. Not for the pain or the stress, but for everything we learned about ourselves and each other."
As Marcus entered his 4th month of recovery, Emily found herself witnessing a transformation that went far beyond his physical healing. The man who had dismissed her safety concerns was becoming passionate about workplace injury prevention, and Emily realized that her worst fear, becoming reality, had ultimately led to outcomes she never could have imagined. Marcus's progress in his safety management coursework had been remarkable. Working with only his left hand for typing hadn't slowed him down significantly, and his motivation to understand injury prevention from both operational and regulatory perspectives gave him insights that purely academic students lacked. "Look at this case study," Marcus showed Emily one evening, pointing to his laptop screen with his left hand while his right arm rested in a supportive sling. A distribution company in Ohio reduced workplace injuries by 67% just by implementing proper lifting protocols and investing in equipment. The cost savings in the first year alone paid for all the improvements. Emily reviewed the study, her clinical background helping her understand both the injury prevention aspects and the recovery statistics. "This is exactly the kind of evidence that could convince management to prioritize safety investments," she observed. "That's what I'm hoping. I want to be able to walk into companies and show them that preventing injuries isn't just the right thing to do morally, it's also the smart thing to do financially." Emily had been watching Marcus develop this passion with growing admiration. The injury that had initially seemed like a purely destructive force in their lives was revealing itself to be the catalyst for Marcus discovering a calling he never would have found otherwise. The turning point came when Marcus received an unexpected call from Janet, his former manager at the distribution center. Emily listened to his side of the conversation with curiosity, watching his expression change from surprise to excitement. "That was Janet from my old job. They've had 2 more workplace injuries since mine, and the regional manager is finally ready to invest in safety improvements. Janet asked if I would be interested in consulting on the project." Emily felt a thrill of excitement mixed with concern. "Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? It's only been 4 months since your surgery." Marcus's response showed Emily how much his approach to decision-making had evolved. That's exactly the right question to ask. 4 months ago, I would have said yes immediately without thinking about whether I was actually prepared. Now, I want to make sure I can do the job properly without compromising my recovery. Emily smiled at the recognition of her influence in his thought process. "So, what do you think?" "I think I want to propose a modified arrangement. Instead of trying to handle everything myself, I could develop a comprehensive analysis and recommendations that they could implement with proper support. That way, I contribute my expertise without taking on more than I can handle physically." Emily recognized this as exactly the kind of strategic thinking that could make Marcus successful in his new career direction. Instead of trying to prove his capabilities through individual heroics, he was learning to maximize his impact through careful planning and collaboration. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks developing a proposal for the distribution center that demonstrated his evolved understanding of both safety management and his own limitations. Emily helped him review the proposal, contributing her medical knowledge about injury prevention and rehabilitation costs.
"This is impressive work," she told him as they finalized the document. "You've identified not just what needs to change, but how to implement the changes and measure their effectiveness. I learned that approach from watching you work with your patients. You don't just treat their immediate symptoms, you develop comprehensive rehabilitation plans that address underlying causes and prevent future problems." The parallel between Emily's clinical work and Marcus's emerging consulting career hadn't occurred to her before, but she could see the connection clearly once he pointed it out. Both of them were in the business of helping people recover from problems and avoid future complications. Marcus's presentation to the regional management team was scheduled for his 18th week of recovery, and Emily could see how much this opportunity meant to him. It represented not just potential income, but validation that his experience and insights could have value beyond his personal recovery. "I'm nervous," Marcus admitted the night before the presentation. "What if they think I'm overreaching? What if they see me as just an injured employee trying to justify a consulting fee?" Emily had been thinking about this concern, and she had insights that Marcus might not have considered. "Marcus, you're not just an injured employee. You're someone who understands their operations intimately and has experienced firsthand the consequences of the safety problems you're trying to solve. That combination of knowledge and experience is exactly what they need." "You really think so?" Marcus asked. "I know so," Emily said firmly. "I've been working in healthcare for years, and the most effective injury prevention programs I've seen are always developed by people who understand both the causes and the consequences of the problems they're trying to prevent." The presentation went better than either of them had hoped. Marcus called Emily immediately afterwards, his voice filled with excitement and relief. They loved it, not just the analysis, but the whole approach. The regional manager said it was exactly the kind of thinking they needed to move from reactive to proactive safety management. Emily felt a surge of pride that was different than anything she had experienced in her professional work. Watching Marcus succeed felt even more rewarding than her own career achievements because she had played a role in supporting his transformation from the beginning. "What happens next?" Emily asked. "They want me to implement the recommendations across all their facilities in the region. It would be a 6-month contract with the possibility of expansion to other regions if the results are good." Emily felt a moment of concern. 6 months of implementation across multiple facilities sounds like a lot of work. "Are you sure you're ready for that level of commitment?" Marcus's response demonstrated how much their dynamic had changed since his injury. "That's why I need your input," he said. "You know my physical limitations better than anyone, and you understand what sustainable workload looks like. Help me figure out how to structure this so I can be successful without risking my health." Emily realized that this was exactly the kind of conversation she had hoped they would be able to have before his injury. Instead of dismissing her concerns or trying to prove his invincibility, Marcus was actively seeking her perspective on managing risks and making sustainable choices. "Let me think about this. We need to consider your physical capacity, the travel requirements, and how to build in adequate recovery time. But Marcus, I think this could be an amazing opportunity if we plan it properly." Emily threw herself into helping Marcus structure his consulting opportunity in a way that would support both his professional goals and his ongoing recovery needs. Her experience in rehabilitation had taught her the importance of graduated increases in activity level, and she applied those same principles to Marcus's career transition. "What if we propose a phased implementation?" Emily suggested as they reviewed the contract details together. "You could start with one facility, develop and test your protocols there, then gradually expand to other locations as you build up your capacity." Marcus appreciated the strategic thinking behind Emily's suggestion. "That makes sense from a quality control perspective too," he said. "If I try to implement changes at all 6 facilities simultaneously, I won't be able to monitor the results properly or make adjustments based on what I learn." Emily helped Marcus negotiate contract terms that protected both his health and his professional reputation. Instead of committing to a timeline that might be unrealistic given his recovery status, they structured the agreement around deliverable milestones that could be achieved at a sustainable pace.
"I'm proud of how you're handling this negotiation," Emily told Marcus after he had worked out the details with the regional manager. "You're getting what you want, while also protecting what matters most." The comment reminded Marcus of how much Emily's perspective had influenced his approach to professional challenges. "6 months ago, I would have agreed to whatever they wanted and figured out how to make it work later," he admitted. "Now I understand that setting realistic boundaries up front is smarter than overcommitting and failing to deliver." Emily's role in Marcus's career transition went beyond just helping him manage his physical limitations. Her medical background gave her insights into the documentation and measurement aspects of safety programs that complemented Marcus's operational expertise perfectly. "You should track not just injury rates, but also near-miss incidents, employee satisfaction with safety protocols, and the time required to implement various procedures," Emily suggested as Marcus developed his evaluation metrics. "That will give you a comprehensive picture of how well the changes are working." Marcus incorporated Emily's suggestions into his implementation plan, and the resulting program was more thorough and evidence-based than anything he could have developed based solely on his warehouse experience. The first facility where Marcus implemented his safety protocols became a laboratory for testing both his professional methods and his personal capacity to handle demanding work. Emily monitored his energy levels and stress responses carefully, helping him identify warning signs that he might be pushing too hard. "How are you feeling physically?" Marcus asked after his first week of intensive on-site work at the facility. "Tired, but good tired," Marcus replied honestly. "My shoulder aches by the end of the day, but it's not the sharp pain I was experiencing earlier in recovery, more like the muscle fatigue you get from exercising." Emily's clinical assessment confirmed that Marcus was operating within safe limits. "That sounds like normal fatigue from increased activity rather than overexertion. But let's monitor it closely and make sure you're getting adequate rest between intensive workdays." The success of Marcus's first implementation exceeded both of their expectations. Within 6 weeks, the facility had reduced workplace injuries by 43%, and employee feedback about the safety improvements was overwhelmingly positive. "The numbers speak for themselves," Marcus told Emily as they reviewed the quarterly results. "But what really excites me is the culture change. Workers are actually speaking up when they see unsafe conditions instead of just hoping nothing bad happens." Emily understood the significance of this culture shift better than Marcus might have realized. "That's exactly what we want to see in healthcare too," she said. "When patients feel empowered to ask questions and report concerns, outcomes improve dramatically." The parallel between Marcus's safety work and Emily's clinical practice had become increasingly apparent as Marcus's consulting career developed. Both of them were working to prevent problems rather than just respond to crises, and both relied on building trust and communication with the people they were trying to help. As Marcus's first contract neared completion, Emily found herself reflecting on how dramatically their lives had changed over the past 6 months. The injury that initially seemed like a catastrophe had led to Marcus discovering work that was more meaningful and potentially more lucrative than his previous career. "Do you ever regret what happened?" Emily asked Marcus one evening as they celebrated the successful completion of his first major project. "That's a complicated question," Marcus said, considering his response carefully. "I regret not listening to you. I regret the pain and stress we both went through. I regret that it took getting injured for me to learn some pretty basic lessons about pride and stubbornness. But," Emily prompted, sensing there was more. "But I don't regret where it led us," Marcus continued. "I love the work I'm doing now in a way I never loved warehouse supervision. Our relationship is stronger because we learned to navigate a major crisis together. And maybe most importantly, I finally understand how to value your expertise instead of seeing it as interference." Emily smiled. "I've been thinking about the same thing. Obviously, I wish you hadn't gotten hurt, but I love seeing who you've become through this experience." "Who have I become?" Marcus asked. "Someone who listens before acting. Someone who plans instead of just reacting. Someone who understands that strength comes from wisdom and collaboration, not just individual capability." The conversation reminded Emily of how much her own role had evolved throughout Marcus's recovery and career transition. She had started as the girlfriend who worried about his safety, became the caregiver who managed his medical needs, and evolved into the trusted advisor who helped him make strategic decisions about his future. "I think we make a better team now than we did before your injury," Emily observed. "We've learned to leverage our different strengths instead of seeing them as sources of conflict." Marcus nodded. "Before the injury, I saw your medical knowledge as something separate from my work life. Now I understand that your expertise is one of our most valuable assets for making good decisions about everything: health, career, finances, relationships." As Marcus prepared to expand his consulting work to additional facilities, Emily found herself confident that they had developed systems and communication patterns that would support his success without compromising his health or their relationship. The injury that once seemed like an ending had become the beginning of a new chapter that was better than either of them could have imagined. 6 months after Marcus's injury, the original timeframe Dr. Kim had given for recovery, Emily found herself watching her boyfriend deliver a presentation to a room full of warehouse supervisors and safety managers from across the region. His right arm, while not quite as strong as it had been before the accident, was fully functional and no longer limited his professional activities. How many of you have ever cut corners on safety protocols because you were behind schedule or short-staffed? Marcus asked the assembled group. Every hand in the room went up, including Emily's, as she remembered her own occasional shortcuts in clinical settings. "I'm not here to lecture you about following rules," Marcus continued. "I'm here to share what I learned about the real cost of taking shortcuts and how that cost affects not just the injured person, but everyone who cares about them." Emily listened to Marcus tell their story, her warning that he had dismissed, his decision to lift the 280-pound beam alone, the injury that had changed both their lives, and the 6 months of recovery that had taught them both lessons they never could have learned any other way. "The person who warned me about the danger was a physical therapist who sees workplace injuries every day," Marcus explained, gesturing to Emily in the audience. "She knew exactly what could happen, but I was too proud to listen to someone who actually had expertise in this area." Emily felt a mix of emotions as she watched Marcus publicly acknowledge the value of her perspective. Before his injury, he had dismissed her concerns as overprotective nagging. Now he was building his career around the same principles she had tried to share with him. The presentation was part of a broader safety initiative that Emily and Marcus had developed together over the past 3 months. Emily's medical background had proved invaluable in creating training materials that explained not just what could go wrong, but why certain practices were dangerous and how injuries affected recovery and family life. "We need to make it easier to do the right thing than to take shortcuts," Marcus told the supervisors. "That means having proper equipment available, adequate staffing levels, in systems that reward safe practices instead of just punishing accidents after they happen." After the presentation, Emily and Marcus drove to the rehabilitation center where she worked for what had become a monthly check-in with David, Marcus's former physical therapist. The regular therapy sessions had ended months earlier, but Marcus continued to visit periodically to monitor his progress and maintain the relationship that had been crucial to his recovery. "How's the arm feeling?" David asked, as he conducted a brief assessment of Marcus's shoulder function. "Good," Marcus replied, demonstrating his range of motion. "Some stiffness in the morning, occasional soreness after long days, but nothing that interferes with what I need to do." "And how are you handling the stress of building a new career?" David asked. This question had become an important part of their check-ins, as David had seen many patients struggle with major life transitions even after their physical recovery was complete. Emily answered before Marcus could respond. She said, "He's learned to manage his workload much better than he used to. We plan his schedule together, and he actually listens when I suggest he might be taking on too much." David smiled at the dynamic between them. "That sounds like a significant change from where you were 6 months ago." Marcus nodded.
6 months ago, I thought Emily's concerns about my work were interference. Now I realize they were exactly the kind of input I needed to make better decisions. Emily appreciated the acknowledgement, but she was more interested in the future than the past. The exciting thing is that Marcus's new career combines his operational expertise with the safety knowledge he gained through his injury experience. He's uniquely qualified to help other people avoid what we went through.
That evening, Emily and Marcus celebrated the 6-month anniversary of his return to work with dinner at the same restaurant where they had celebrated their first anniversary 3 years earlier. The tradition of marking important milestones there had taken on new meaning since Marcus's injury and recovery. "I've been thinking about something," Emily said as they waited for their food to arrive. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had listened to my warning that night?" "All the time," Marcus replied honestly. "If I had used proper equipment or waited for more help, I never would have gotten injured." "But would you have changed careers? Would you have discovered your passion for safety consulting? Would we have learned to work together the way we do now?" Emily asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Probably not. I was comfortable in my old job, even if it wasn't particularly fulfilling. I might have kept doing warehouse work for years without ever discovering that I had other capabilities." Emily had been thinking about the same questions. "I don't want to romanticize what we went through because the injury and recovery were genuinely difficult," she said, "but I think we're both better people now than we were before it happened." "How so?" Marcus asked. "You've learned to value other people's expertise instead of assuming you know everything. I've learned that supporting someone through a crisis can be just as rewarding as my professional work. We've both learned that our different perspectives make us stronger as a team rather than being sources of conflict." Marcus reached across the table and took Emily's hand with his right hand, a simple gesture that would have been impossible during the first months of his recovery. "I think the most important thing I learned is that the people who warn us about dangers aren't trying to limit us. They're trying to protect what they value." "And what I learned," Emily replied, "is that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best outcomes if we're willing to grow from the experience." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "What is it?" Emily asked. "It's from Janet at the distribution center. They just got the final injury statistics for the quarter. 0 workplace injuries across all the facilities where we implemented the new protocols." Emily felt a surge of pride that was different from any professional accomplishment she had achieved on her own. "That means there are dozens of families who won't have to go through what we went through." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And it means your warning me about workplace dangers has ultimately helped protect a lot more people than just me." As they finished dinner and prepared to head home, Emily reflected on how completely their lives had been transformed by the events of the past year. The injury that had initially seemed like a catastrophe had become the catalyst for positive changes that neither of them could have imagined when they were sitting in that hospital room 6 months earlier.
1 year after Marcus's injury, Emily stood beside him in the same warehouse where his accident had occurred, but everything about the space had been transformed. New hydraulic lifting equipment sat in strategic locations throughout the facility. Clearly marked safety zones indicated different procedures for different types of materials, and electronic displays showed real-time information about safe lifting limits and available resources. "It's hard to believe this is the same place," Emily said, looking around at the improvements that had been implemented based on Marcus's recommendations. "The equipment makes a difference, but the real change is in how people think about safety," Marcus replied, watching a team of workers use proper lifting procedures to move equipment that would have required dangerous manual lifting under the old system. Emily had insisted on accompanying Marcus to this final inspection of his first project, partly because she wanted to see the results of their work together, but mostly because being in this space had symbolic importance for both of them.
This was where their lives had changed forever, and returning here as successful partners felt like completing a circle. The injury statistics speak for themselves, Janet told them as she conducted the tour. 0 serious injuries across all facilities in the 18 months since we implemented Marcus's protocols. Workers' compensation costs are down 68%, and employee satisfaction scores are at historic highs. For Emily, these numbers represented far more than just improved business metrics. Each prevented injury meant a family that wouldn't have to endure the stress, financial hardship, and relationship challenges that she and Marcus had experienced. Each avoided accident meant someone wouldn't have to learn the lessons about pride, communication, and partnership the hard way that they had. "What's the feedback from the workers?" Emily asked, her clinical background making her interested in the human side of the changes as well as the statistical outcomes. "The best part is that people actually speak up now when they see unsafe conditions," Janet replied. "Before, workers were afraid to slow things down by asking for proper equipment or additional help. Now they know that safety concerns are taken seriously." Marcus smiled at this response. "That was one of the hardest parts of my old job, feeling like I had to choose between being safe and being productive. These protocols eliminate that false choice." As they completed the tour, Emily found herself thinking about how much her own perspective on her work had changed over the past year. Before Marcus's injury, she had treated workplace accidents as individual medical problems that required individual solutions. Now she understood that preventing these injuries required systemic changes that addressed root causes rather than just symptoms. "You know, your injury has changed how I work with my patients too," Emily told Marcus as they drove home from the warehouse visit. "I spend more time now talking with them about the workplace conditions that led to their injuries, and I try to connect them with resources for addressing those conditions." "Really? How so?" Marcus asked. "Well, for example, I had a patient last month with a back injury similar to yours. Instead of just focusing on his physical therapy, I helped him document the unsafe lifting practices at his job and connect with his union representative to advocate for better equipment." Emily appreciated the parallel between Emily's evolved approach to patient care and his own career development. "So, we're both working on prevention now, instead of just treating problems after they happen." "Exactly. And I think we're both more effective because we understand the broader context of these injuries, how they affect families, relationships, finances, and long-term career prospects." Marcus's consulting work had exceeded both of their expectations. Word of his results had spread throughout the industry, and he now had more opportunities than he could accept. More importantly, the work felt meaningful in ways that his previous job never had. "I got another inquiry today," Marcus told Emily that evening as they reviewed his schedule for the coming months. "A manufacturing company in Colorado wants me to develop a comprehensive safety program for their entire operation." Emily felt the familiar mix of pride and concern that accompanied each new opportunity. "That sounds like a major project. What would it involve?" Marcus had learned to provide the kind of detailed information that helped Emily assess whether new commitments were realistic and sustainable. 6 facilities, about 800 employees total. They're looking at a 2-year implementation timeline with quarterly on-site visits and remote monitoring between visits. "That's a significant commitment," Emily observed. "How would it fit with your existing projects?" This was exactly the kind of conversation Emily had hoped they would be able to have before Marcus's injury. Open discussion about professional opportunities that considered both immediate benefits and long-term sustainability. Marcus's accident had taught them both the importance of making decisions based on complete information, rather than just immediate enthusiasm. "What's your instinct about it?" Emily asked. "My instinct is that it's exactly the kind of project I want to be doing. Large-scale, systemic change that could prevent hundreds of injuries over the next few years. But I also want to make sure I'm making the decision for the right reasons, and with realistic expectations about what I can deliver." Emily smiled at how completely Marcus's decision-making process had evolved. "I think that's exactly the right way to approach it. You're considering not just what you want to do, but what you can do sustainably and effectively." As they discussed the opportunity in detail, Emily realized that their partnership had become one of their greatest professional assets as well as their strongest personal foundation. Marcus's operational expertise, combined with Emily's medical knowledge and risk assessment skills, created a perspective that neither of them could have developed individually. "I think we should accept the Colorado project,"
Emily said after they had worked through all the implications together. It's the kind of work that aligns with your values, uses your unique qualifications, and can be structured in a way that supports our relationship and your health. Marcus appreciated not just Emily's conclusion, but the process they used to reach it together. A year ago, I would have made this decision on my own based on gut instinct and personal ambition. Now I understand that the best decisions come from combining different perspectives and considering all the relevant factors. And a year ago, I would have worried about expressing my concerns because I thought it might seem like I was trying to control your career choices. Now I understand that sharing my perspective is one of the most valuable contributions I can make to our partnership. Their conversation represented the culmination of a year-long journey that had transformed both of them individually and as a couple. Emily had evolved from the worried girlfriend whose warnings went unheeded to the trusted partner whose expertise was integral to major life decisions. Marcus had grown from the stubborn supervisor who dismissed outside input to the collaborative professional who actively sought different perspectives. "I think we should celebrate," Emily said, raising her wine glass. "Not just the new project opportunity, but everything we've accomplished this year." Marcus clinked his glass against hers, using his right arm with the easy confidence that had returned over months of patient rehabilitation. "What should we toast to?" "To learning that the people who warn us about dangers are usually the people who love us most, and to discovering that our different strengths make us more powerful together than either of us could be alone." "To partnership," Marcus agreed, "and to never again dismissing the wisdom of someone who cares enough to speak up when they see us heading toward trouble." As they finished their celebration dinner, Emily reflected on how completely their lives had been transformed by the events that had begun with her warning about workplace safety. The injury that had initially seemed like a catastrophe had become the catalyst for discoveries about themselves, their relationship, and their potential to make a meaningful difference in the world. Marcus's recovery was now complete not just physically, but in every other way that mattered. He had found work that fulfilled him, developed a partnership with Emily that was stronger than either of them thought possible, and discovered capabilities he never would have explored without being forced to reinvent himself. For Emily, the journey had been equally transformative. She had learned that her expertise and perspective were valuable, not just in clinical settings, but in every aspect of their shared life. More importantly, she had discovered that supporting someone through a major crisis could be as rewarding as her professional work, and that the right partnership could amplify both people's individual strengths. The warehouse supervisor, who had once ignored his girlfriend's safety warnings, had become a nationally sought-after consultant whose work was preventing the very injuries Emily had tried to warn him about. The physical therapist, whose concerns had been dismissed as overprotective worry, had become an integral partner in developing solutions that were making workplaces safer across multiple industries. Together, they had proven that personal tragedies could be transformed into meaningful contributions, that the worst experiences could lead to the best outcomes, and that the people who warn us about dangers aren't trying to limit us, they're trying to protect what they value most. 18 months after Marcus's injury, Emily found herself in a position she never could have imagined when she first warned him about workplace safety. She was co-presenting with Marcus at a national conference on occupational health, sharing their story not just as a cautionary tale, but as a model for how personal experiences could be transformed into systemic solutions. The most important lesson we learned, Emily told the audience of safety professionals, healthcare workers, and business leaders, is that preventing workplace injuries requires understanding both the operational factors that create dangerous conditions and the human factors that lead people to accept unnecessary risks. Emily's role in Marcus's career had evolved from supportive partner to genuine collaborator. Her medical expertise complemented his operational knowledge perfectly, and together they had developed training programs that were being implemented across multiple industries. When I warned Marcus about the dangers of lifting heavy equipment without proper support, I was drawing on years of experience treating similar injuries, Emily continued. But I didn't understand then how to communicate that knowledge in ways that would actually change behavior. The audience was particularly interested in Emily's perspective because so few workplace safety programs incorporated input from healthcare professionals who treated the injuries that inadequate safety measures caused. Her clinical background gave her insights into both the immediate and long-term consequences of workplace accidents that purely operational experts might miss. The key insight for us was realizing that most workplace injuries aren't the result of individual carelessness or bad luck. They're the predictable result of systems that prioritize short-term efficiency over long-term sustainability. After their presentation, Emily and Marcus were approached by representatives from several organizations interested in implementing their integrated approach to safety management. The demand for their services had grown beyond what either of them could have anticipated when Marcus was struggling through his initial recovery. We've proven that combining medical knowledge with operational expertise produces better outcomes than either approach alone, Marcus said as they reviewed their schedule for the coming year. The question now is how to scale this model to reach more organizations. Emily had been thinking about the same challenge. What if we focused on training other teams to use our approach rather than trying to do all the implementation work ourselves, she suggested. We could develop certification programs that teach safety managers and healthcare professionals to work together more effectively. The idea excited both of them because it offered a way to multiply their impact without requiring them to personally visit every organization that could benefit from their methods. It also represented the kind of strategic thinking that had become characteristic of their partnership since Marcus's injury. I love that approach, Marcus said. We'd be teaching people to fish instead of just providing fish. Emily smiled at the analogy. And it would allow us to focus on developing new methods and research instead of just repeating the same implementations over and over. Their conversation was interrupted by Emily's phone ringing with a call from Dr. Kim at the Rehabilitation Center. Emily had maintained her position there throughout Marcus's recovery and their joint career development, finding that her clinical work informed her safety consulting and vice versa. Emily, I wanted to let you know that we're seeing some interesting trends in our injury statistics. Workplace injuries in our region are down significantly, and several of our patients have mentioned that their employers recently implemented new safety protocols. Emily realized that they were seeing the broader impact of the work she and Marcus had been doing. Do you think there's a connection to the programs we've been helping companies implement? I'm certain of it, Dr. Kim replied. The types of injuries we're seeing less of are exactly the ones your safety protocols are designed to prevent. It's the best example I've seen of how upstream prevention can affect downstream healthcare outcomes. After the call, Emily shared the news with Marcus, and they both felt a sense of satisfaction that was different from their individual professional achievements. They were seeing evidence that their work together was having impact beyond what either of them could have accomplished alone. You know what this means? Emily said. There are families out there that won't have to go through what we went through, people who won't have to learn these lessons the hard way. Marcus nodded. And it means that your wanting me about workplace safety has ultimately had impact far beyond just our relationship. The knowledge you tried to share with me that night is now helping protect thousands of workers. Emily reflected on how much their understanding of that original warning had evolved. At the time, Marcus had seen her concerns as interference in his professional autonomy. Now they both understood that her warning had been an expression of her love and her professional expertise, and that dismissing it had been a mistake that led to unnecessary suffering. The most important thing we learned is that the people who warn us about dangers aren't trying to limit our potential. They're trying to help us achieve our goals in sustainable ways. And that accepting input from people who care about us isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. As they prepared for their next collaboration, developing a comprehensive training program for safety managers and healthcare professionals, Emily realized that Marcus's injury had taught them both lessons that extended far beyond workplace safety. They had learned to value each other's expertise instead of seeing their different perspectives as sources of conflict. They had learned that the strongest relationships are built on mutual respect and shared decision-making rather than individual independence. Most importantly, they had learned that personal tragedies could be transformed into meaningful contributions if approached with the right mindset and adequate support. I have one more confession, told Marcus, as they worked late into the evening on their training curriculum. I'm grateful for how everything turned out. Even the injury? Marcus asked. Especially the injury. Not because I wanted you to get hurt, but because it forced us to become better versions of ourselves and better partners to each other. Marcus understood what she meant. If I had listened to your warning that night, I never would have gotten injured. But I also never would have discovered this work that I love, never would have learned to truly value your perspective, and never would have understood what it means to be part of a real partnership. The tragedy would have been if we had learned nothing from the experience. Instead, we learned everything we needed to know about listening to each other, supporting each other, and working together towards goals that matter. As they prepared for their next collaboration, Emily looked at Marcus, his right arm fully functional again, his confidence restored but now tempered with wisdom, his career transformed into something more meaningful than either of them could have imagined possible, and realized that their story had become exactly what she had hoped it would be when she first warned him about workplace safety. It had become a story about the power of partnership, the importance of listening to people who care about us, and the possibility that our worst mistakes can become the foundation for our greatest contributions. Emily's warning had been prophetic, not just because she had predicted the injury, but because she had seen the potential for Marcus to become something greater than he had been. The warehouse supervisor who had injured himself lifting a 280-pound beam had become a nationally recognized safety consultant whose work was preventing similar injuries across multiple industries. The man who had dismissed his girlfriend's warnings had become a husband who valued her counsel above all others. And the woman who had felt helpless to prevent the injury she saw coming had become a partner whose expertise was integral to solutions that were making workplaces safer for thousands of people. Marcus's arm had healed, but more importantly, so had their understanding of what it meant to truly listen to and support each other. The injury that had once seemed like an ending had become the beginning of a partnership that was stronger, more meaningful, and more impactful than either of them could have achieved alone. Emily's warning had ultimately been more than just a prediction of danger. It had been an invitation to a deeper level of partnership and mutual respect. And though it had taken a serious injury for Marcus to accept that invitation, the result had been worth every difficult moment of the journey they had traveled together.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.